PsiloHealth Integrations is a monthly series of talks where we bring together people who work in different disciplines that converge in psychedelic therapy, healing, entheogenic plants, healthcare, chemistry, and other important subjects that touch psilocybin education, legislation, and integration. In this episode, we hosted Eleanor, Bramwell, Jesse Gould, and Colin Wells, all healers in their own right, to discuss trauma, what it is, how it manifests itself in the body and mind, and how to treat it and move survivors into a growth stage. We would recommend this conversation for people who have experienced trauma, healers and clinicians, or anyone who is interested in how humans overcome the invisible wounds of traumatic experiences. We hope that you enjoy this informative and entertaining talk as much as we enjoyed hosting it.
So one thing that was kind of a common thread that all of you spoke about was about your creating communities. And I want to come back to that in just a second. But first, I thought it would be really good to kind of set the tone to see what you would define trauma as. So we can make this very broad. You can make it as specific as you'd like, and I'll just throw it out there to the group.
Well, I'm happy to talk. Obviously, I can talk all day long, so I'll just go ahead and talk some more. What would I define trauma as? I would define trauma as being as unique as a fingerprint. No one person can tell you you were or were not traumatized. That's up to you and what you've been through in your life. You know, I am very surprised by my own nuanced trauma very often because it is so like I will think that I have something very much under control and it doesn't bother me for a long time. And then all of a sudden I have a lot of trauma from Afghanistan in regards to dogs and having to silence dogs who were giving away positions or being loud or just, you know, that kind of thing. That really had a severe impact on me. And so that kind of trigger is still very, very real for me. But I will say that I think all people experience trauma, especially people in a Western capitalistic society like we have created for ourselves. And I truly hope that the new psychedelic reformation and renaissance that we are experiencing will help break some of those molds, because it's traumatic to live in any sense in a consumer-based country, because it's not what we're programmed to do as human beings. Our souls are kept under and kept, you know, muted and silenced, and we're not able to really shine in the ways that our human essence is supposed to. And therefore that is traumatizing. And, you know, people with depression and severe anxiety and these things that really don't have any concept of why it's happening or reasoning behind it. I strongly believe, in my no training way, you know, just from my intuition, that it has a lot to do with the fact that us as human beings are not truly dissolving what it is to really, or incorporating what it is to really live and really be authentic and transparent, and not consume, rinse, repeat, sleep, consume, rinse, repeat, sleep. Because that in and of itself, and living in that way, in my opinion, is traumatic. Then you throw on top combat or childhood abuse or military sexual trauma and all these other things that are obviously very impactful on someone, and you really can get bogged down under it. And then when you start to unlayer it all, it can almost seem overwhelming. So that's my little 2 cents.
Yeah, that just kind of going on the same vein as Colin. In my mind, trauma is just, you know, sort of a blanket term of a variety of issues that affect us and stay with us, and that can sort of derail our health or alter our good decision making in a variety of different ways. Getting stuck in negative patterns, choosing unhealthy lifestyles. And as Colin said, you know, it's I think it can be a part of life, you know, not just even the Western context, but all sorts of other societies. You know, that's why these traditions, especially ayahuasca and, you know, the indigenous mushroom traditions, arose, because the shamans, the healers, the facilitators in their group were meant to heal the tribe and keep them together, and sometimes use these substances, but oftentimes use the substance themselves to connect to this, but be responsible for the mental health, the physical health. So like if you go to Peru, a lot of these healers know all sorts of different plants, not just the few that are psychedelic, but the ones that will help your stomach, the ones that will heal you. And so trauma, whether it's physical, some sort of injury, some sort of mental injury, some sort of moral injury, a spiritual injury, all these things are common occurrences. It's just a question of the realization of those, the acceptance of those, and having the proper support to heal in those. And that's one of the things I think we've lost or are disconnected to in society, is that we do have healers, but it tends to be very much on the physical healers. And we've kind of lost sense of what, whether it's moral, spiritual, or mental healing really means. And fortunately, like Colin said, I think psychedelics are bringing us back to this, where we realize that we do need to be more aware of this, and as a community, support each other, help each other out. That's what makes sort of the veteran community a powerful group in this, is that we've already know how to work together, and we've already had these strong bonds with individuals forged under fire. And they get separated because we go to our different walks of life. We get distracted by sort of day-to-day jobs, and that adds to sort of the mental health issue. So bringing these together, like Colin is doing, under the umbrella of healing and coming together and talking is important. And you can see it not even in the veteran community, but just as a general sort of thing. Our mental health as society is getting worse and worse, and social media and in some ways the internet is helping us connected, but it's also bringing out a lot of the unhealthy patterns that we're having. And so trauma is something that we need to come to terms with, and we need to find all sorts of different tools to heal and come together. And obviously Eleanor is doing this approach with psychedelics, but also in sort of more of the body-mind connection as well.
Hey guys, so speaking of dogs, there is a therapy dog in this room. You might see a tail walk by, or if I look away from the screen, checking in on him, he might make a little appearance. But I'm so glad that you asked this question. It's one of my favorite questions. It's really important. So I'll do just a little bit of psycho-ed about the nervous system, because I think that will be helpful. Our nervous system is supposed to be a self-regulating device. So, we go into a sympathetic, immobilized, a fight-flight response if the car in front of us slams on our brakes. It's adaptive. We get to avoid a car accident. But then are we able to come back to baseline? And there's other times we go into activation, like if you go to CrossFit, or, like one day my daughter will take her first steps and I'm going to mobilize to run towards that. This is very adaptive. And in that sympathetic and that mobilized state, a lot happens. Your pupils dilate, your heart rate increases, norepinephrine, cortisol, adrenaline can pump through the system. Digestion can stop. There can be vasodilation. Blood can rush into the leg muscle so you can run. So it's like a lot happens, and it's very adaptive. But then after you've avoided the car accident, or you put down, the barbell or whatever it is, can your system go back to baseline? And inversely, the nervous system is also supposed to immobilize sometimes. So, if a bear was eating me, I wouldn't want to be present to that. So there's a dissociation, a shutdown, a freeze, an immobilization response. It's quite adaptive. That's who would want to stay present to the horrors of war, or a nurse in shock trauma, or a child being abused. So these sort of immobilization responses can be really, really adaptive. But again, after the bear goes away, or we leave the emergency room, are we able to come back to baseline? And there's other forms of immobilization that are adaptive too, like digesting food. Our bodies go into a rest digest mode, which is a mild immobilization. Or during quiet bonding behavior. Or female-bodied people, whether or not they identify as he or they or she, if they're breastfeeding, mamas out there, that you are there for a long, long, long time. And to encourage someone to hang out there, you go into an immobilization response. You release oxytocin, ideally, not cortisol. But the whole point is that the nervous system is supposed to go into activate and mobilize. And then it's supposed to go into shut down, freeze. But then it's supposed to be able to come back to baseline. And so at Bodywise, our definition of trauma is any experience that the system has been unable to integrate. Anytime the nervous system is unable to come back to baseline and self-regulate. And so there can be large traumas, like big T trauma, like, a natural disaster, heart surgery, being held up at gunpoint, being at war, having a single incident, a single bombing. That's a big T trauma. That's a single incident. But there's also little things that happen. For example, chronic stress. If our nervous systems are constantly going into that activated state over and over and over, that can cause the nervous system to become unable to self-regulate, and then we'll start having trauma symptoms. So trauma is rarely actually caused by the event itself, but it's caused by the biological cascade of dysregulation inside that happens later. And trauma symptoms are actually, at Bodywise, we don't call them trauma symptoms. We call them coping strategies, because we understand that it is a valiant, desperate attempt to get back to baseline. Binge eating, for example, from a nervous system perspective, will force the body to downregulate if you're overactivated, right? So if someone is utilizing heroin, we don't call them a heroin. They're engaging in heroin behavior or anorexic behavior. And we actually work really hard to take away the stigma and the pathology around that. Because my God, there's already enough self-loathing and like internal contraction around that. They don't need shame from the external, especially because a lot of it's compulsive. And again, it's involuntary. There's actually an adaptive quality to teaching the nervous system to downregulate when you can't cope by eating too much food. So I feel really glad that trauma is becoming a buzzword, because that takes away the shame. And if the shame is moved away, we can start having a different conversation. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And it doesn't mean there's anything broken. It simply means we need a little bit of help teaching the nervous system how to self-regulate. And every single being and body has this biological intelligence. Just like if you get a cut, there's this cascade that immediately takes that cut back to wholeness. And so when we create the appropriate conditions, when there's safety, when there's social engagement and community, when there's many other things in place, depending on the particular situation, that body, that being, that incredible, intelligent human, it wants to come back to wholeness. So that, yeah. And I think the last thing I want to say about this, it's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but it feels very relevant to what Colin and Jesse said. Thank you guys so much. Community connection. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we have these things called attachment systems, which effectively it's a proximity seeking system. So a baby chimp in the wild, I always ask people this question: how long do you think it would survive without its mom? And folks are like, oh, 3 months, a week, a day, because they're able to mobilize and eat food. A baby chimp would live for an hour without it eaten. So, and we're basically hairless chimps and not nearly as intelligent in a lot of ways. Actually, we've lost a lot of our deep knowing. We've cut ourselves off at the knees in our society. It's really sad. These baby chimps have created a proximity seeking system that teaches them they're more likely to survive if they stay close to a primary caregiver. And that means we have that same attachment system. Our survival impulse says if we are safe to a primary caregiver, we're going to live. Okay. And our survival system also says, oh man, if mom or dad likes my and a lion comes, I'm not going to be saved. So connection and belonging, literally, it's not just an emotional need, it's a biological need. We think we're going to die without it. And so just kind of taking that in, and the fact that we live in this world where we're really devoid of connection, of intimacy, of authentic connection. And if you look at societies that have higher happiness ratings, there's multi-generations living in a home together, and not the thing that makes people happier. Human connection. We're biologically designed to need each other to thrive. We're not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but our nervous systems, our bodies, we went from being prey to becoming predator when we banded together in a tribe. We need each other. And we've really lost that in this dominant culture, although there are pockets of people remembering that we really need to be with and for each other.
I really love everything all of you said, and a question that's coming up for me as we're like getting into this discussion about community and the ways in which our Western culture can be traumatic in a lot of ways. I'm curious of like, what are the components for you that you've learned in your personal journey, your professional journey, about how to self-regulate, Eleanor, using your terms, your body to work in this sort of culture, or practices, Colin, that you take up to sort of usurp a lot of the trauma that happens just by being in this sort of capitalistic society. And same with you, Jesse, as well.
I want to laugh because it took me 10 years to learn to self-regulate. So the nervous system, our ability to self-regulate, we learn it from having regulated parents. And if there was one developmental phase missed, where like even if you had really epically regulated parents, which most of us didn't have, like let's say mom's dad had a car accident, you might miss that part of self-regulation. So I believe that in our society, we need to teach nervous system regulation in schools. If it gets missed at home, it's held by the greater community. But some of the things that I've incorporated in my life, I live outside of the dominant culture. I live in a small community. We call it the Happy Hippie House, with bees, our own food. And we have restorative justice circles where when someone engages a behavior that's like not cool, we don't shame them. We sit down and we're like, hey, what's the hurt underneath that? And how do we make room at the table for that? We remind them who they really are, and then we find solutions to that. There's like unconditional belonging in that way. I spend one day a week without a phone. I go into nature regularly. I spend a lot of time foraging and build really relationship with myself. I move my body. That changes the hormones that I release. I spend a lot of time practicing gratitudes, which rewires the brain. So our experience of well-being or happiness is pretty much predetermined. Some of it's genetic, but most of it's learned. And oh, is someone having trouble hearing me? Can you closer? Oh, is that better, Luna? Sorry, guys. So our experience of well-being or happiness is relatively predetermined. Some of it's genetic, but a lot of it is learned. And we have this mapping, this neural mapping in our brain that sets us up to have a certain like hormonal response. And you can change that. You can break apart that wiring and then lay down new wiring. So your body's like on autopilot, releasing a different bath of hormones. And that's an oversimplification, but I can send you guys links to it if you want to send out. But gratitude practices have been, it's an evidence-based practice to rewire the brain, right? And it has been to increase well-being. So we're really lucky. There are whole fields of psychology right now studying what things make people happy. Connection with others, exercise, good food, mindfulness or meditation, which rewires the brain, so neuroplastic tools. And flow states are some of the most important things for feeling a sense of well-being and thriving.
I think Eleanor covered it pretty well. And I think that's what we're learning about sort of the mental health sort of dynamic is in the past, especially sort of the not to demonize the Western side too much, because I don't want to get into that. You know, there's good and bad everywhere, but the Western model on mental health has really kind of made it more of a like a binary sort of system of like, you have this diagnosis, you have depression, and so this is the exact course that we're going to do. Unfortunately, now there's, I mean, it's been for a while, but now especially, there's been much more attention to the whole body, the holistic sort of approach of there's all these elements that are going into it. You know, they've shown that the brain gut connection through the vagus nerve is strong, and gut microbiome, and we're made up of all these microorganisms, and we all know that exercise and meditation or something that gets you in that peaceful spot can also help, and as Eleanor was saying, like help you regulate all this kind of stuff. So it's all of the things combined. And so I think on the individual basis, especially for those, you know, like I'm in New York City, and so, you know, if I have to work here, if I have to be here, it's not, you know, you're not doomed, but it's just more really checking in on yourself. And I think that's what we're not trained to do as kids. It's kind of just more of like knuckle down and get to it and just kind of ignore your feelings for a lot of us. And so it's really more of a day-to-day practice, or as much as possible, of just checking in, seeing what's going on, seeing what your triggers are. Sometimes stress, you know, I mean, generally stress is unavoidable, and sometimes certain triggers are unavoidable. But you can know like what things, what personalities, what stuff really draws your attention, what really gets you down. And then you can kind of limit your time, or if you are forced to be exposed to that, you can understand how you're going to feel afterwards, and maybe take a time to, you know, unwind and integrate and go through all that process. It's the same thing with everything else, you know. For me, it's fine if I have like a big, huge meal of like a giant cheeseburger every once in a while, but I know that's gonna, like, you know, make me tired through the rest of the day. But it's not like I didn't fail, just I have to have that sort of discipline within my day-to-day life, where generally speaking, I try to eat healthy, and I know how that's going to affect me. And I think you just kind of need to understand yourself. And it's really, mental health is all about self-love and self-awareness, and we're not taught that. But it is something that's very important. Understanding, you know, a lot of your trauma sits within your like intuition. Like there's always parts of your body that know that there's something that's traumatizing, or they know that's something that's triggering you. It's just a question of how adept we are at listening to that. And that's one of the reasons I like psychedelics, because I think the process, if you use them in that sort of manner of getting to know yourself a little bit better, it really does enhance your understanding of what your intuition's telling you. Like, oh yeah, the whole time I was with this person, I was feeling this way because that person was an energy draw, or that person was like pushing my buttons, and I had no idea that was happening. And so, like I said, just, you know, like for individuals, just really taking those times, even in the morning, taking notes, journaling, doing the meditative practices. I think all these sort of things, and being conscious that it's not just one thing that you do right. It's having a awareness and mindfulness of what you're doing throughout your life. These are all inputs, and it's fine if you want to do this and this and this. Nobody's perfect, but we all kind of know where we can strive for, and we kind of know like, oh, I spent too much time watching Netflix. Maybe I should put some discipline on that, or something like that. And just be kind with yourself, but also you have to have a little bit of discipline.
Yes, and all so fascinating, you guys. Eleanor, you've said some incredible things, and I thank you for just, it's very, very insightful. And you know, for someone like me who's not, you know, trained really, I always say, like, I could go to school and learn what doctors know, but doctors can't go and learn the last 4 years that I know walking with veterans. But that being said, you know, it's so gratifying to hear someone like Jesse and Eleanor and everybody here who are trained in these things so well, reverberating what I know in my heart and have come to learn through just living and practicing things and trying things out. So I feel very vindicated with all my insanity over the last 4 years. So thank you guys. And I will also say, yeah, it's taken me, I mean, it's a practice, right? You're never perfecting how to cope or how to integrate, as you said, integrate the traumas and get back to that baseline. For a lot of my life, I spent, military-wise or outside of military, beating my head against the wall whenever things got hard. You know what I mean? Like just over analyzing, over guilting, over disciplining, under disciplining. I've never really been one to do things in moderation. I still am not. Like, it's like, all right, now I'm going to do wellness and psychedelics, and I'm going to fucking do every last bit I can find and try everything on myself, and, you know, find out. So that way, when I'm talking to you, I know exactly what hape feels like, and I know what this feels like and that feels like, and all these things. So that is something that I try to practice, which is, you know, accepting the person that I really feel comfortable being, which is someone who sometimes, you know, does things in excess and but also can be very mindful and loving and grateful and giving and all these things. And that's just who I am. Your question regarding practices, and I've been writing notes and notes, but the practices for me to self-regulate are very much rooted in nature. The outdoors, the ocean, my dogs, my children. The other one for me is intimacy. I find connecting to the love of my life, Cookie, the mother of my daughter, to be one of the more profound healing modalities I can do for myself. It just brings me back to, you know, an amazing grounded place of accepting myself and accepting those around me for who they are, and being my fully authentic, realized self, fulfilled. Even though I do have my troubles and I do have my bad days, they are offset by my ability to mitigate the risks that arise from them through my mindfulness, my psychedelic use, and all these things. And then I'm hoping, because I have 4 children, 2 biological children and 2 stepchildren. And my goal is to create a world, create an existence, create a reality, create a dimension for them in which they are brought up to have these practices, to be that chimp. And to know these things going forward, rather than having to spend 3 decades beating my head against the wall, trying to figure out what it is that's hurting me. Why can't I figure out how to deal with this? Why can't I just move on from this? Why is it that being cut off made me so angry in traffic? Why can't I just, you know, I want them to have these practices ingrained in themselves. And as far as psychedelics go with that, for me, psychedelics were a kickstart to gratitude and mindfulness and acceptance of myself. They were like a jump start to that. But what I hope for my children is that it will accentuate their already ingrained mindfulness when they come to psychedelics, at which they obviously will at some point. It's inevitable. So what I hope for them is when they do experience traumas, which all humans do, and they will go through their own, and I can't change that, and I can't lock them in a drawer, and I can't keep them from experiencing what life has to offer. But when they do experience these things, the psychedelic use could be there for them if they need it, but the tools they already have been brought up with are what they will really lean back on. And if they need to, the psychedelics can accentuate that, but not kickstart it like it did for me. My path is my own, my hero's journey. Everything that I've been on and been through has brought me to this place right now where I would know nothing I would change about anything. But mitigating the risk and teaching the practices that all of us are discussing here to the youth is where I feel I can make the most impact. And it also helps ground me in my practices to self-regulate, because I'm teaching it to someone who has that childish sense of wonder about them still, which is again what psychedelics do to veterans, because when I see veterans taking large doses, microdosing, hiking, jumping in the river, it's that ego is dissolving, and you see the childish sense of wonder coming through them. And so that is, you know, those are some of my practices, and I hope I made a little sense there. But yeah, passing it on to the youth is huge for me. Thank you.
No, thank you. It made a lot of sense there. So I'd like to copyright the term "Be That Chimp" and start putting them on PsiloHealth t-shirts. That's I'm going to carry that one with me for a while. Eleanor, did you have something to say?
I did. So a few things, and I'll try and keep it brief because I'm doing a little time check, but I think it's important to acknowledge there's all of these tools. There's so many of them, but we also have to meet ourselves where we are. And, you know, in periods of life, you know, if you're in active crisis and you're having flashbacks and you're terrified of sleeping and you're curled up on the bottom of the shower stall crying, you're not going to go exercise and eat a kale salad and like do mindfulness and gratitude. That's really just not realistic. So we also just have to keep a reality-based perspective about like, what's the next right step? And I've been thinking, so I just want to hold that out there too, right? Like these tools of resilience and well-being, they're not another thing to flog yourself with if you're not able to. I think Jesse spoke so beautifully to this. There's, when do I need to be more disciplined? And when do I need to love myself more? And you know, we all know. And different people are on different sides of that coin. And the other thing is I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I think I'm going to put out an online resiliency course. And if you guys want it, I want to give you guys access because there are so many tools that would make such a difference and they should be accessible to everybody. Like everybody. For example, the research around spending 5 hours a month in nature is more effective than antidepressants. Like, I mean, this is repeated research. And there are so many simple things that people can do, like even brushing their teeth with the opposite hand that can take them out of autopilot, that can make a difference in their life. Little things can make a big difference. So I think I'm probably gonna put that out, and PsiloHealth, if I do, I'll let you guys know. You can pass it on because I want to give these tools to folks. And then I think the last thing I want to say about this is in terms of practices, one of the fastest things you can do to impact your overall well-being is change your nutrition. There's now a whole new field of psychology where people are studying, it's a nutrition psychology, where they're studying how different foods and supplements are directly correlative to personality disorders, mood disorders. For example, sugar and anxiety and depression are strongly linked. And if you instead of saying, I want to take something out, maybe that's too hard, maybe add something in. It's hard to hear me, huh? All right, gonna get a little closer. Is that better? Oh, hi. One of the most important things you can do quickly to feel better is change what's going in your body. Over 95% of the serotonin, the happy hormone in your body, is made in your gut, right? Sugar is one of the most destructive things for someone. The link between sugar and depression and anxiety is terrifying. So if you can't do anything else, just try and cut out sugar, right? And what that will do for your system will be shocking. But yeah, I know, Scott, it sounds like you were about to ask another question, so I'm going to hand the proverbial tuning fork.
No worries. Thank you. We're here to listen to you. So I appreciate everything that you said and everything that everybody said in that last little round. But I do want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We're coming up at about an hour. So I'd like to just take a quick moment, and I want to tie together a few concepts that we discussed. And then I have one more leading question that I'd like to throw out for our guests. And then we're going to go to Q&A, if that's okay. So to kind of put a bow on what trauma is as defined by our speakers today. So we come into this world as self-regulated beings, right? And some sort of change happens, right? And that change is what we consider to be a traumatic event. And that change could be long-term, such as living in a society that no longer respects who we are as beings, or it could be something short-term. It could be a violent act either committed by yourself or committed upon you. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be a mixture of both. And from that event, behaviors are formed, and those behaviors are either adaptive, such as your CrossFit workout, which can be very, very difficult, but it helps you in the long run, or it could be maladaptive. You see one of your friends die, and so you relive that moment, and you're constantly stuck back in that moment. So from there, we look at ways of healing those traumas, right? And you all kind of talked about it in your own different ways. There's this idea of going back to baseline or wiping the slate clean, right? So that you can kind of begin anew, right? So whatever structure has formed in your brain based on that traumatic incident, it's like we need to get back to baseline. There's self-discovery, right? So mindfulness, it's being able to understand and check in with yourself, right? And then there's also the community factor. So my question that I want to put back out to the group is, how do psychedelics intersect with that wiping the slate clean, that self-discovery and community? And I'll open it up.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. How do psychedelics assist in that wiping the slate clean, getting back to baseline, that self-discovery and mindfulness, and that forming of community?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I just lost technology for a moment.
Oh, absolutely.
The last one to speak, I'm happy to listen first, but I'm excited about this question.
Go ahead, Eleanor. You got the floor. Go ahead.
Thanks, Colin. Cool. And I would love to take a hike with you sometime, brother. Like, let's do it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So default mode network is this large scale brain network. It was found accidentally. Human test subjects were in MRI machines and they were doing tasks. So like putting together a puzzle or tying knots and things. I don't know what the tasks were. Those are just examples of the kinds of things they might have done. And in between these tasks, folks were hanging out, resting. And for some reason, the brain was really active. And that's when the default mode network was discovered, that when we are at rest, our brains are still actually very, very active. So it's now called the task negative network. And the default mode network goes online when we are autopiloting, when we are dreaming of the future, like, ooh, what am I going to wear on a date? Or, man, I wish I'd said this thing to my boss. Or when you drive past your highway exit accidentally, when you're just on autopilot, the default mode network, it's just kind of like going all the time. Unfortunately, it's also referred to as the negative self-referential reel, because if we think negative or mean things about ourselves, they tend to get wired in there, and those are happening all the time. So, high-level overview, we're human animals, right? And so we're like always wanting to live, to survive. Our ancient nervous systems are set up to support us in survival responses. So even when you get into a room and you look around you, part of the reason you have that orienting response is to know, oh, there's no bear in here, real or perceived. So as part of this, we have something called the negativity bias. So anything that has gone bad or could go bad, we're constantly scanning for to keep ourselves safe. And it was adaptive, like learning, like, oh, that animal charges is important for me to know. And there isn't always processing time. So I will avoid the animal on autopilot. Unfortunately, that's no longer helping us, it's hurting us. Because what this means is that the negativity bias is constantly scanning for what has gone wrong, right? On autopilot behind us, like all the time. The things that are happening in our brain unconsciously all the time are what has gone wrong, what will go wrong, what has gone wrong, what will go wrong. And because we're like, anger is not a thought, it's a body-based experience, it's a felt sense, it's the hollowing of the gut, it's the rising of the heat, it's the contraction of bones. That's a cascade of hormones that makes us feel that way. And hormones are often triggered by thoughts. So if our brain is constantly running this reel of what has gone wrong and will go wrong, guess what? Hormones are bathing our bodies all the time. And this is an oversimplification, but you guys get the point. So psychedelics are extraordinary in breaking apart the neural pathways in the default mode network and the rest of the brain in increasing neuroplasticity. And that's why things like gratitude practices are so valuable, because when you think a new thought, you create a new network, a new connection. And so it's kind of like the first time you try and go cross-country skiing, it's really challenging. And each person who goes, it gets easier and easier as the tracks are made. So it's kind of like psychedelics break apart what has always been, so there's an opportunity for a new wiring system. That's just the Western science answer. And there's a few other Western science answers. On a personal level and anecdotally, what I've gotten to see in clients and beings that I travel with is that we get to remember who we came here to be. There's this deep, deep, deep learning. I've seen parts of myself that were so painful, I locked them away for 30 years because I couldn't handle it. And medicine brought me to the door of like this, it was a stone room for me, that particular one. And I met the like shriveled, dying part of me. And then I got to integrate it. And then I got to learn about all the behaviors on top of that that kept me from feeling that. And those behaviors didn't actually make me the person who I wanted to be. They weren't nice to me or other people. And so psychedelics are also this way of wounded parts of us, seeing things that we're ready to see that are ish, seeing who we're here to be, understanding like more truthful, soulful, centered parts of us. So there's a lot that happens, but also on a wisdom level. I mean, if you go into a forest, there is this thick mycelium. Can you guys hear me? I just realized I'm like far away from the computer again. Are we good?
I think you keep getting in the zone and relaxing
leaning
to
back,
a level.
yeah.
Yes.
I don't want to feel like I'm yelling at you, but I'll project. So there's this thick mycelium network in the forest, and it connects the root system of every tree to every other tree. And when there is a beetle, for example, that hits one tree, it can send chemical signals through this mycelium, the trees all the way across the forest, letting them know. And they can change the hormones effectively that they're releasing through their flowers, and they can attract like bats or other things that would eat that beetle. I mean, this is incredible wisdom and intelligence. When there's a baby tree, a big tree of the same genus can support it again through this chemical network. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. But the intelligence and wisdom of plants, I mean, we just don't know how to speak that language yet. Some of us are remembering how to speak it, and there are some medicine people that have been around and never forgot. But that's a third way that psychedelics, particularly the plant medicines, is there's just this deeper wisdom and conversation that they can guide us through.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'm glad you brought up the mycelial network, because that is something that it's palpable for me. It's like a tangible reality in a lot of ways. Public speaking, for instance, used to really bother me, and I used to have trouble doing it. And then I started to use psychedelics and these different things, and I could feel the network reaching up through the feet of the people I was talking to, and literally feeding me what words would work for them to understand what I was trying to say. And I feel it in my soul. And every step that I take in nature and walking barefoot, and it is so, it's traumatizing to be separated from it. It's traumatizing to develop an ego. An ego is trauma in and of itself, because it is teaching us to have shame and to not follow certain instincts that may benefit us and may allow us to be our more authentic selves. And to speak on, psychedelics process, the psychedelics allow you to forgive yourself. They teach you that there is more than what it is you've been focusing on. And to further on in my layman's way on what Eleanor has been saying is, all perception is a hallucination. The world is an amorphous blob, ever expanding, ever dissolving right before us. The way the world looks to that beetle on the tree climbing up the mycelial network is completely different than the way you and I see this world and experience it and engage in it. That being said, you're going through life's traumas and ego and consumerism and the things that really bog our spirit down. Your senses are taking in these things and perceiving them in its own auditory and all these different ways that it does so. And that's creating source memory that you will then rely on, right, to live and put up defenses and further your fight or flight response or any of these things. And again, blame. But what I want to bring it back to with veterans and my own journey specifically is that through my use of psychedelics and visualizing my traumas in the forest on Wachuma and seeing the black spirals pouring out of my mouth while I screamed, Afghanistan at the trees and screamed these things out and just seeing them being pierced. This was the poetic mycelial way of rewiring those source memories to gratitude and to the fact that I'm still here and I am still able to affect people and affect myself in positive ways. And therefore, when those memories, those source memories come up, when I smell gunpowder or when I hear a dog not stop barking or any of these things, the source memory, yes, is still present because you can't cure PTSD. To cure PTSD is implying that you can go back and erase the source memory altogether, which is obviously impossible. But what you can do is rewire the response to that. And that's what psychedelics did for me. And that's what I see them doing for the members of Veterans Walk and Talk, is that it's rewiring these source memories to a place of gratitude and acceptance rather than shame and horror. And so that's the part that I see psychedelics playing in the healing of humans and things like that. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I'll just kind of sum up everything that's already been said here. I think we pretty much covered the whole docket of it. I guess the first aspect of the question was sort of smoothing the path. And so I think that's the combination of the psychological and the physical side. And we're still, learning about it and as much as people want to know in terms of the scientific and all that kind of stuff. And there does seem to be a lot of evidence that it can actually heal the brain and sort of reset a lot of features, whether it's negative patterns or addictions or what have you, give us very accurate reflections of ourselves. And just kind of what I've seen with a lot of veterans, just zoom out. I think that's a big feature of it. It's almost like you view yourself as this third person Sims character. And so you can see what you're doing. You can see sort of the negative rabbit holes that you go down or how you are actually in a relationship or with other people. And that's a very valuable tool if you act on it. So within that, it does smooth that path where you're not as stuck. I've heard a lot of people say like you're driving a bike in the mud, and then the more you go on the same sort of route, it's harder to leave that sort of same path. Whereas this can kind of be that smoothing agent. You still have to choose the good path, but you do have that aspect, and that's where integration, that's where support comes in. On the other side, kind of I mentioned this before, I think on a psychological side or what have you, whether you have trauma or what the nature of the trauma is, it really does, I think, just bring you back to your center. Like I said before, in terms of that connection to your intuition, connection to yourself, connection to the things that are, causing these issues with you, sort of a bigger understanding and not just being bogged down by it, but being kind of more connected, understanding, and allowing it to go through you. In terms of the third part of the community, I think it's all connected. Just as your brain is connected to your body, your health is connected to the community health. We see that a lot with PTSD. It's not just an individual issue. It affects the whole family. It can affect generations. It can affect people around you. And so especially I think the most immediate, there's a lot of ways in terms of rebuilding communities and all this other kind of stuff, and those are all valid. But the most immediate is that by having more healthy people, more aware and conscious and self-centered, or centered, not self-centered, having centered people and a bigger community of that, then that's just going to have ripples effect to other people, and either they follow that path and ask you like why you're doing that, or they're also in that healing themselves, and then that just strengthens and makes the community even better. And so that's, you know, the sort of the media effect of, they often say a lot of people want to change the world and they want to, you know, go to Congress and do all this kind of stuff, but there's sort of the wise view of like, first you have to really heal yourself. You have to be healthy before you can help others. And once you get to a certain level, then you can help others. And then you can help more the companions that you have. Then you can start branching out and healing the community. But if you are, you know, falling apart, you're not going to have a wide effect change. And so that's how I think it has to happen, is first look at yourself, like how can I improve myself, and then start looking outwards. And so that's sort of the quick way, I guess, of summing that up and answering that question.
Wow, thank you guys. That was really amazing. So before we wrap up and go to questions, I would like to ask you one more. If you could say one sentence to someone who's out there who's watching this, who's considering their first psychedelic journey, or someone who is severely traumatized and they're looking for some help, what would that one sentence be?
I'll start it off on this one. The one sentence I would say is, take your time, do your research, and take it seriously.
Yeah, I agree. I'm reading the Immortality Key right now, and I find that book to be fascinating. And it starts out with something written, I believe, in a Greek church, ancient, that is, if you die before you die, you won't die when you die. And that is something that really resonated with me with my psychedelic use, because I can take it to mean ego, I can take it to mean physical life, I can take it to mean so many things. So I would say that, because I'm trying to be right now. If you die before you die, you won't die when you die. And then also educate yourself.
Preparation and integration. These are the most powerful substances on the planet, not to be taken lightly. Great reverence, great respect, preparation and integration.
Beautiful, thank you. So before I turn it over to Saad to do the Q&A, I hope you guys still have a little bit of time to take any questions. I would just like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this. This conversation went above and beyond anything that I'd hoped for, and I had really high hopes for it. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the work that you do. And my sentence would be, you can't change the waves, but you can learn how to surf.
Oh, I'm not.
With that, I'll turn it over to Saad.
Hey everyone, that was awesome. Oh my gosh, I feel like, you know, even though I've been in the psychedelic space now for, you know, a couple of years, few years, and I feel as though I'm doing my part in, you know, trying to heal and identify and work through trauma. You guys shed the light on, there's still so much to learn and grow and heal internally. So just that was, yeah, thank you so much for a really extraordinary and powerful conversation and dialogue. And yeah, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all of this. Seriously, thank you so much. Faith asked real quick if we can access a recording. We'll have a recording readily available via playback. Stay tuned for the launch of our site coming up here soon. I know Zay and I have been working on that for some time. So yeah, stay connected, Faith. We'll get that out. We did receive one question. Someone asked about, we have received two questions. Well, the first question was regarding if there are any organizations where someone with a background in counseling can get a certification in psychedelic therapy. Well, I see Eleanor is shaking her head. Would you like to take that question?
Sure. So there's a few different medicines that are currently available for extended access, and that you can get training for. But and Isaiah, if you want to weigh on this, you might know more than I do. But I know that right now there's training available for ketamine. It's been expanded by the FDA for it's approved for access. You know that there's currently training for psilocybin, and MDMA is in a phase 3 clinical trial. I think it's getting pushed through because of COVID, and research has been changed pretty drastically as a result of COVID. But I would recommend going to MAPS, the Association of Psychedelic Studies, and MAPS, and they do a lot of education. They do a lot of research. They do a lot of fundraising. They do a lot of legislature lobbying. They're incredible, and that would probably be a great place to get access to like different threads. And again, I think it depends on the licensure that you have and the state that you're in. I know that MAPS is also raising a ton of money, because here's the thing: like, once some of these medicines are approved, you're going to have to pay for X number of preparation sessions. And then you're gonna have to pay for like a 9-hour therapy session, and then X number of integration sessions, which is really cost prohibitive to most folks. So they're also raising a lot of money to make sure this medicine is accessible. So check out MAPS for sure. Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. There it is.
Yep. Thanks for that. MAPS.org. I also I answered her via text and said CIIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies, has a pretty awesome program. I think it's 1 year long, but I do believe their upcoming class is fully booked. So yeah, MAPS is a great start. I'm not sure if anyone else has any thoughts there for some certification programs.
In the U.S., again, what Eleanor said, it depends on kind of like what you're looking for. There's a few different, obviously, like integration, like coaching kind of stuff, but in terms of actual like clinical research and stuff, those are the top ones.
Awesome. And I know someone specifically, Chris asked specifically if there's anything that we're aware of in Florida. Scott, are you aware of anything in the Florida area?
Programs for psychedelic therapy? No, nothing really above ground. The only like above ground psychedelic activity that we have down here is we have like the Soul Quest Church. I don't really have an opinion of them positive or negative, but that's really all that I know of.
Cool.
I know that I think there are some clinical trials going on, but I'm not up to speed on them.
That is something interesting for folks who are wanting to, like, if you live in an area and you don't know how to access medicine, Santa Daime, this is a church, and they legally can use ayahuasca because it's a religious practice. So that is a way to legally make contact with the medicine in the United States.
Awesome. We have another question from Gina. She asks if we know of any mentorship programs or affordable resources for BIPOC communities that are looking to become psychedelic therapists.
I would send anyone over to Reggie. His Instagram is at Oakland_Hyphae, and the Sabina Project. I know that those two are partnering to do some amazing things in the exact vein that you're asking about. So that's the Sabina Project, named after Maria Sabina, and Oakland Hyphae, HYPHAE. They are partnering to do some amazing work in that, and they're amazing people. So.
Yeah,
I was also going to recommend Sabina.
Yeah, the Sabina Project's in the Baltimore area. They're great people. And then another group that I've recently been familiar with that appears to do some really great work is called One Village Healing. I think they're out like Upper East Coast, I believe like Maine area, New England area. And they have a lot of online resources, online groups that you can check out.
Awesome, awesome. Another question was introduced by Elizabeth. She just asked a general question of if anyone here practices breath work at all. Is that a practice that you guys implement? And if so, how's that like?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Being a better, yeah, go ahead, Jesse. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, breath is, key to a lot of this. Yeah, the breath and psychedelics go hand in hand, and I think if I remember correctly, she was talking about like the Sandgroff, like breath work and stuff like that. You want to have more like training, but they are actually, I think, doing studies on the holotropic breath work and all that kind of stuff. But even just like normal breath work is good. It's oxygen is key, and it can do amazing things for your body.
Yeah, piggyback on what he said, the holotropic breath work is something that I'm beginning to practice, cold showers, these kinds of things in my daily routine, and it's pretty profound, and you can achieve a lot of the same state of consciousness that psychedelics provide through these different practices. So and also just, when things become a little too intense from a psychedelic trip, grounding yourself through your breath work is crucial. Meditation, breath work, they're prerequisites for anyone that I will ever serve in any capacity as psychedelics go. So yes, I can't sing their praises enough.
Yeah, so breath is extraordinary. Every inhalation is sympathetic, fight, flight, and every exhalation is parasympathetic, rest, digest. And when we engage with certain breath practices, we actually train clinicians and other providers to use breath. You can change nervous system states. You can amp yourself up if you're dissociative, and you can downregulate yourself if you're anxious. And breath practices also will rewire the brain and increase cortical thickness in the hippocampus, which is where you make your brain cells. The breath has been proven to do a lot of things, right? And it's free. It's like wherever you go, there you are. And so we used to have agency programs before COVID. We served refugees, torture survivors, neglected children, domestic abuse survivors, and breath was a huge part of our programming. We were running research on trauma-informed yoga. The VA was funding it, but again, COVID, we lost that. And breath was one of the cornerstones of everything we did, because guess what? If you go into a Section 8 school, you can give kids this information. If you're in shock trauma, it's available there too. It's our birthright. It's the first thing you ever did, and it's the last thing you'll ever do. And I could go on and on and on about the breath. It's something we have a research team. It's something I spend a lot of time paying attention to. But I do breath practices every morning, and it's changed my life and my ability to self-regulate. And Colin, I'm with you on the cold plunges. So for those of you that are interested in cold plunging, Isaiah and I live in Baltimore, and every Sunday people come over. We have this giant tub outside full of ice at the Happy Hippie House, and we all get in it. And I've been inviting him here for a while. So, but
Go do it.
Yeah, I'll be there soon.
He's like in May, right? But Wim Hof, this guy, oof, what a fellow. He ran a marathon in the Arctic Circle in bare feet, and he has climbed Everest in shorts. And I mean, the list goes on and on. And in 2014, he was given 12 folks who had never done any breath training or cold training, and they were injected with endotoxins. Within 15 minutes, they were able to self-regulate their nervous system. Breath is such a powerful tool for teaching nervous system plasticity. So something I do in my personal practice is I'll do breath practices that amp me up, and then breath practices that downregulate me. And I'm teaching my nervous system, I can go up, but I don't have to get stuck. I can come back. So it's a really preventative tool, but it's also a great intervention. If you're stressed out, you've got tools available to you right there in your back pocket. And And there's so many links for breath practices. And if I do that resiliency course, I'll make sure I really beef up that chapter. But I am also a trained breath worker. I spent 6 years studying in integrative breath work, which is effectively holotropic, and I've assisted Stan Groff. And through those practices, you can produce the same hormone that you release when you drink ayahuasca. So it is a way that you can start to have these transformative, non-ordinary states of consciousness available in your waking life. And for some people, that's a safer place because it's self-driven, and it means that you can pause and stop when you need to. However, that being said, just like plant medicines, sometimes there can be strong cathartic experiences, and I've seen people go into psychosis from these. So again, preparation, setting, integration. And what's medicine for one person might be poison for another. So, make really good and informed decisions for yourself.
Awesome. Thanks for that. We have a couple other questions. David is curious to know which psychedelic is the most beneficial for PTSD symptoms. Would anyone like to take that question?
Can I touch on that really quick?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't think that which psychedelic is really the question, because they all seem to work in different ways. And all somehow the same ways. I would say the question that you should ask is, what is the set and setting that you require in order to heal? For some people, things like ayahuasca, which is very healing for me, can be very traumatic in the wrong set and setting. So I think what it comes down to, a lot of things that all of our guests have talked about. Preparation is super important, and integration is super important. But you want to make sure that you're in the right situation, regardless of what the psychedelic is, so that you can, address what your symptoms are.
Yeah, I agree completely with everything Scott just said. And having done this, PTSD, traumatic brain injury being the two things that most veterans who come to Veterans Walk and Talk are experiencing, I could say wholeheartedly that I used to kind of try to answer that question, and now I would only ask you a question back by exactly what Scott said. What is it exactly that your intention is? What is it exactly that is lacking in your life that you see the PTSD drawing out of you? For instance, a lot of the issues that the veterans that come to my group are dealing with is a lack of intimacy with their children or their loved ones. So for that kind of therapy, I find San Pedro to be very, very beneficial to connecting them to themselves, thus connecting them to their loved ones. But at the same time, I've heard people sing praises about MDMA being obviously an empathinogenic and connecting you in a loving way to people like that. But for instance, myself found MDMA to be very detrimental to what I was trying to achieve from taking it. It's not something that was great for me. Like Eleanor said, medicine for one, poison for another. So these types of questions, they need to be asked to someone who is really going to care about and care about the things that you're trying to achieve through psychedelic use. And that intention, preparation, and integration that follows is as important as whatever psychedelic modality you choose to partake in. I myself have not done ayahuasca yet. My first ceremony is coming up in April. It found me, and that's exactly how I wanted it to go. I didn't want to search for it. I wanted it to just kind of be like, here it is, and it did. And so I'm very much looking forward to that. And I very much am looking forward to discipline and the prerequisites and the diet and everything that goes into the ayahuasca ceremony, almost as much as the ceremony itself. And then obviously the integration and stuff, which I'm trying not to get too ahead of myself. But so that's, when veterans come to me and they say, well, should I try ketamine? Should I try this? Should I try that? It's always I regurgitate another question. Well, what is it exactly that your intention is? What is it that your PTSD is manifesting as? These are all questions that someone needs to look into before advising you on which modality would be right for you. Thank you.
Yeah, and to put an exclamation point on that, if you go to somebody and they instantly say, you need to do this, then you probably want to get a second opinion.
So I know Jesse had to head out. I believe this today's event was scheduled until 8:30. I'm not sure you guys looking to stick around and hang out for a little bit, answer more questions, or we do you want to wrap it up? We had one more.
I'm happy to answer another question or two.
Sounds good.
Depending on question's length, I might have to bow out, but let's hear it.
We'll do one question, then we'll head out. And thank you guys so much for this.
Thank you.
Elizabeth asks, we'll explain. Stan Groff suggested that the best therapeutic practice of doing a psychedelic experience to cover their eyes and lay down to encourage inner exploration. What are your guys' thoughts on that approach to having your psychedelic experience?
I have no comment. I am not a subject matter expert. I will let you guys quarterback this one.
Well, since I've been talking about things that I'm not a subject matter expert on this whole time, I have no problem continuing that right now and saying that I will say that inner exploration through whether it's psychedelic use or meditation or anything like this is equally as difficult as it is rewarding. And if you're compelled to do that kind of work and to follow that path, I think that you should do that. I think that there's no one person that can tell you how to heal, no one person that can tell you this wellness journey is for you. It's up to you to self-discover that in many ways and just keep asking those questions. So I myself very much enjoy down in the sand with my eyes closed on psychedelics and self-journeying. And I found that because of my physical pain and my mental anguish that sometimes comes and goes in very, very powerful ways, that astral projection and inner exploration can be very helpful for me to cope with those. So that's just my answer.
Thank you. Okay, guys. Well, I think those are all the questions that were sent our way. I'm glad we were able to get through all of them. Eleanor, Colin, thank you for all the work you are doing. Thank you for the support you're providing to your communities. Keep it up. And if there's anything that we can do through PsiloHealth, please let us know what we can do to support. And for the attendees, is there any last remarks that you'd like to share with them?
Just hit me up at Veterans Walk and Talk on Instagram or veteranswalkandtalk.com, email. Again, what I do is guerrilla wellness. It's, I am not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained in any form. I'm simply a man who healed himself without the use of these things and tried things until I found something that worked. And so I'm happy to speak on any of that. And in the future, in the next year or so, there's going to be a lot of big things happening with Veterans Walk and Talk, and I am going to bring in mental health professionals and people like Jesse and Eleanor in that vein, and all of you guys, Saeed, Isaiah, Scott, all you guys are incredible. And so I think there's a real synergistic effort towards wellness that we can all come to fruition with. And I just really look forward to that. And I learned so much here, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Hey, Colin, you had a lot of monkeys eat a lot of bad mushrooms before they found the good ones. So don't discount your opinion, because you've earned that wisdom.
You heard me talk to it. Did I sound like I was discounting anything I said?
Okay.
Why do you think I'm working on my ego so much? It's fucking right here. So yeah, but thank you. Appreciate that.
And really quickly, I just want to say, like, this was an amazing conversation with all of you. I appreciate all of you so much. Like, this was like actually like nourishment for me today, and especially talking about like things coming full circle, Scott, that you mentioned in the beginning of this call. Is like, I teach out in the Baltimore area, and I got the opportunity to pilot a class on wellness for the high school. And I start that on Monday, and this is just kind of invigorating just so much, especially our conversation about how this needs to be discussed and learned at a young age. So I'm just going to take and absorb all of this and kind of share this with my students on Monday. So grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Brother Isaiah, call me and I'm going to send you like all the all the resiliency things.
Definitely.
Yeah. Also, let's take a hike sometime soon. I miss you.
Yeah, definitely. We will.
But closing remarks, I just feel extreme gratitude when I come into spaces like this, where we're going against the grain and we're asking the questions. And I feel so much hope and so much possibility. So huge thank you to PsiloHealth for the work that you do and for welcoming me to be here. And Colin, it was really a treat meeting you. I love the man cave.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is my sanctuary. So thank you, man. This is my lab as well. That's my flow hood, and that's where I do all my mushroom work.
Guys, I hope you have a great night. I'm going to sign off. Bye for now.
Bye, guys.
See you. Take care, everybody. Bye.